Okay, tonight's lecture is audience analysis. And so I'm going to talk to you about audience analysis, particularly with regard to our first project, Mobile Me. So the first thing that you see here, it says Trilogy of the Mind Theory. The stuff we're going to talk about tonight are based on psychology and neuropsychology. So Trilogy of the Mind is talking about how our minds work. Let me go to the next one here. The first thing that we want to think about is cognition. Cognition is perception, memory, and thinking. So in terms of what we're doing with our projects, the perception and memory part really can be based on what your target audience knows. So in terms of how do they remember things, how do things stick in their mind, if you were thinking about a mobile app, for instance, you did some research on that, and you were asked to look at things that your target audience likes. So you might already be looking at different kinds of apps and things that they use, or social media that have certain ways of working. So when your target audience looks at that particular thing, it brings up a lot of memories of how it works. So in terms of the cognitive load, if you use something familiar, your target audience has an easier time. The next thing is emotion, and emotion is really important. It says here, how does emotion affect experiences and memories? Emotion is almost always how we fix a memory. So if you think to yourself, what was a time, you know, maybe in my life that I was really happy? So think about it, and do you start to get some kind of maybe a memory coming up? You think, oh, that time I went with my friends to this or that family vacation, or that special time when I won an award. But the emotion helps you remember. One of the things that's very important in user experience design is that we are always designing for an emotion. Now, I want you to think about this, because sometimes the emotion is not necessarily happy. In fact, there are a lot of times when the emotion that you're designing for is something else. So the emotional tone may be something about confidence. Like, let's say you're designing a mobile app for banking. I don't know if you want that to feel entertaining or happy, but you want your mobile app for banking to feel trustworthy, secure, maybe convenient. A lot of things that would have emotional overtones and lifestyle overtones. So the two things that you always think about when you're designing are, first of all, the cognitive load. What is it? What are we trying to ask people to do, and what are they trying to remember? And then the emotional experience and how that should be actually positioned. The next thing that we talk about is motivation. And motivation is huge. Motivation is, here it says, what makes us take an action? What motivates us to do something? When we think about the app that we're designing, I ask each of you to analyze yourself, record data about yourself, and then think about something that you personally would find useful or interesting or something that's engaging. Okay, so you have to think about what would motivate you to do that. So maybe let's say in your app, you thought to yourself, you know, after looking at the times in my day, I noticed that I spend 2 hours a day driving. I hate to drive. It's always a terrible time. There's a lot of traffic. I'm very stressed out. So you might think, okay, I'm going to use this mobile app to help me determine which times of day is the commute less. So maybe by analyzing the data that you have, you could see when you could make better use of your time. So maybe you're saying, hey, if I left at 8:15 instead of 7:45 in the morning, I will spend 30% less time on the road. Maybe you've never thought of that because you never really analyzed the data that closely. So examples like that, something would motivate you and something would motivate your users that you're designing for. It's your job to figure out what is that thing. Because if the motivation is there, then the app or the product you design will be something that we incorporate into our life. If it isn't, that we might try it for a time or two, and then after the novelty wears off, we won't use it anymore. So the motivation is a very critical key, and you always want to think about those things. So those are the three pieces that really are how our mind works. is we understand things through cognition, we have emotions, and things that motivate us to do something. The next thing that I want to talk to you about is the sensory systems. The sensory systems are basically how our body works, what we are able to detect in our environment. So right now, our sensory system that we're using for this lecture is vision, also sound. Those are two senses. Are you using your tactile sense? Well, I don't know. If you kind of, look at the screen and go, oh, I'm gonna, maybe not so much. It's more vision, sound, emotional tone. You might be hearing things in my voice or things that you're thinking, but your sensory system is taking in that information. The first one that I'm going to put up on the screen here is your motor system. The motor system is reflexes, body awareness, and balance. And those are important in certain kinds of design. If you were to think about how body awareness is part of the design of a mobile app, at first thought, it might seem like, yeah, no, Deb, not so much. I'm not balancing anything. But in terms of usability, let's say that you've got, let me grab a pop here. Okay, let's say I've got my phone. I'm holding it in a certain way. Remember how many of us are texting as we walk? You've never done that, right? You've never texted as you were walking to class and almost hit a car, right? So the idea of body awareness, balance, and how we interact with something, if you were thinking about a mobile app, what you might be thinking about are, where did I put the buttons? Are they easy? What finger do I use? Have you ever thought about how your hand holds the device? And what if I was left-handed? Would it be different? So how we think about our motor and our body system, our body awareness, in actuality does come into play even in something like the design of a mobile app. I'll give you an interesting example in terms of the motor system, mobility. When designing for persons who are elderly, one of the things that I found curious is that there was a greater tendency in some cases to use an iPad over a computer. And the reality was not that the computer or the mobile app on the iPad were better than the other, but a person can use an iPad sitting in a chair, even if your grandmother or your grandfather can't walk. They can sit at their chair, they can sit in a wheelchair or something like that, and easily use a tablet. Whereas walking into another room or going up and sitting at a computer desk would be almost impossible. So the idea that your mobility factors into even things as basic as mobile technology is actually a reality. And we as designers, as we are looking at the demographic of all of the people we're designing for, those are things you ask yourself. What is their age? What is their mobility level? What language do they speak? What are their favorite products? You're asking yourselves all these research questions, but don't really ever dismiss anything. No matter what comes up, always say to yourself, does this influence? How would this influence some aspect of one of my target audience? And you may actually surprise yourself and say, you know what? The motor system, body awareness, and balance actually even factor into using your phone. The next is the visual system. The visual system is an interesting one because if you think about this, about 80% of our brain is devoted to the visual cortex. That's a lot. And the bulk of the information that we glean from our environment is visual. So you are glancing around the room, you are looking at things, things are capturing your attention. What you need to know about the visual system is that there are different things that happen if you're reading type than if you're looking at a picture, okay? So what are some of those things? If you were looking at the type on the screen, you can probably see here on my slide, it says sensory systems. That's a little bit larger. You can see white space around that. And then you can see the bullet points text, and it's smaller, a little bit more compact maybe. Your eye, as it's reading text, has two different brain systems at work. One is called saccadic glance, and the other one is called smooth pursuit. Saccadic glance is how your eye bounces from one letter to the next. If you don't kern your type close enough and the letters get too spread apart, we don't see them as a word anymore. And they are hard to read, they take longer to read, the words don't make sense to us as quickly. So it really does influence the readability and legibility of type. The other thing I mentioned was smooth pursuit. Smooth pursuit is how you can easily and fluidly read a line of type. So if you look on this screen, it says reflexes, body awareness, balance. Your eye can smoothly go from one word to the next. If those were too spread apart between words, there again, it breaks down. There's that gestalt coming into play. The visual system in terms of images or your environment will notice things at different rates or in different ways. So if I have, I don't know, can you see my mouse on the screen? Yeah. Do you notice how it's moving? It's moving all over. I'm just moving that mouse all over. What we have a tendency to do is follow something moving. Interesting, right? So if you are designing something that is a motion graphic, your viewer will follow the thing and attend to the thing that's changing. In this case, the movement is a changing item. If I pick up some other stuff on the screen or start doing other things, you will notice where it's going. Now, if you were putting a face, let's say that you are looking at the faces on the screen, we tend to look at the eyes. And so if a face or a photo has people in it and they're looking straight out, we're looking at their eyes. And this may be a bit of a Western culture thing, because in Western culture, it is acceptable and expected that we would look a person in the eyes. So we're very used to that. In other cultures, you do not. You would avert your eye gaze. So you don't make direct eye contact. You're looking out of your peripheral vision. So culturally, there'll be differences. But generally speaking, we look at the eyes. If we don't look at the eyes, if the eyes are not engaging us directly, we look where the eyes are looking. So if you put a picture with some folks in there and they're gazing up, we'll look up too. Now, how is this important? Let's say in the thing that you're designing, in this case, the mobile meme, maybe you're going to use some kind of a startup screen or something that has a photo, okay? So maybe it's a person, maybe it's an ambiguous kind of person because you want it to appeal to a lot of different ages or genders or cultures. But even so, the way that you engage or work a photo, let's say you had a photo with multiple people in it, maybe two of the people are looking at each other as if they're talking to each other. The better way to organize a third person is have them looking straight out. And the reason you do that is it's as if they're looking at you. And so now you've broken that barrier, you've broken that fourth wall, you've got them engaged because they're now looking at the eyes of the person in the photograph that's looking at them, and they will look through the photograph and see the other people are talking to each other. Suddenly, you have engaged me as part of this little group of friends. So there's a lot of social, cultural things that you can embed in a visual system. You can show things with photos that you can't really say with words. And so if you wanted to show comfortable, fun, friendly, you could put those words on the screen, but it seems a little dorky. But if you show me a photograph that I relate to, because I'm your target audience and you are now trying to pick up the look and feel and the visual vibe that I am responding to, this is very important, because if this thing that you've designed instantly relates to me, if I like it, I'm going to accept it better. I am actually even going to forgive any mistakes. So one thing, this will drive our engineering friends crazy, okay? But if you make something that's very, very visually attractive and it appeals to your target audience, we have a saying in design that says beautiful things work better. And the more beautiful and desirable we see an object, the more motivated we are to use it. And we don't care how hard it is to use. And the other dirty little secret is if something looks very basic, plain, and unfinished, even if it works perfect, we don't like it. We're like, ew, gross, right? So you've got to know. I often say our engineering friends give products the body. Our designer friends give it a soul. So body and soul, you guys are all on that gig, okay? So you got the fun part. You got the part where you make things come alive. So when we start talking about what we're designing right now, okay, we're working with our Mobile Me. The first step was your low fidelity, you were data collecting, and you were making wireframes. Okay, cool. That's just figuring out what to do. The mid fidelity was like, okay, now put it into some kind of a, a framework, put it into a diagram, get it like that. High fidelity, this is where we're giving it that soul. This is where we're tricking it out. We're making it have the beauty, the funkiness, the funness, anything that is going to communicate, we're putting that in there. We're using text, we're using photos and images, colors, all sorts of things that have that emotional appeal. So if you go back to our first screen where we said cognition, emotion, and motivation, this is where we've hit it. Visually, you're going to communicate just instantly with people. Now, let me see here. The auditory system. Auditory sometimes factors in, and you got to think about this. Auditory isn't always exactly what you programmed into it. Okay, it could be. It could be like right now you're listening to my voice and you're seeing my image, you're seeing the screen and all these things. It could be that, okay, that part of the auditory. But the other thing the auditory is like if you have a product, it might be if you know how the keyboards make a little click. So if you were typing on your laptop or something and they just make a little click, 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 you hear that and you know that something happened. Or the beep when you have actually, maybe you did a command or something. So auditory system is oftentimes biofeedback. And without that feedback, like if your keys made literally no sound, or sometimes, like if it's just a touch screen, sometimes if it took time, you don't even know if it worked. You're like, did it work? Did it work? So a little feedback gives us just that little confidence boost, like, oh yeah, it's working. Sometimes I'll do that with the spinning icon too, except we hate the spinning thing because it makes us freak out. But auditory is interesting. You can have auditory that is voice, which has direct connotations. Voice will have inflection, so you'll know if something's a question. Even if you didn't speak the language, if I said something like, Watashi wa no namae wa Deborah desu, Ohayo gozaimasu, and you go, I don't speak that language, Deb. But you could tell there was phrasing, you could tell there was a certain cadence, you could tell there was an emotional overtone, right? So there's a lot in voice and sound that carries that same stuff. It still has the cognition and it has the emotion, and motivationally, maybe you find certain voices pleasing. So you're motivated to listen better or something like that. The other thing auditory can be is environmental sounds. And so oftentimes they'll say the auditory system is 24/7. So even if you are asleep, you can hear things. And you've probably all woken up to a sound, something like that. Auditory is also how we monitor our environment. So if you are sitting in a room and you hear outside a siren, can you imagine how the siren sounds when it is far away and then it gets closer and closer and then it goes past you? That what they call the Doppler effect. You can tell that. You can tell location from sound. You can tell urgency. If it's a siren versus if it's a little bell from your yoga class, it's all different, right? So you can tell so much. If you have an audience who does not have a good auditory system, you need to be aware of that. And if you don't have good hearing, you are usually scanning your environment visually, looking around. Because you guys, as you're sitting here, you can hear if something's going on behind you. And if it sounds appropriate and it sounds like you expect, you don't look, you don't turn around because you can tell everything's okay. A person who can't hear has to constantly be visually scanning. So that's something to keep in mind, that it might impact how they use the product. So our auditory system is a very interesting one because it can convey the cognition, the emotion. It can convey all sorts of overtones of qualities to it. Now let's come down here. I gotta find my mouse again, you guys. Proprioception. Proprioception is kind of like the example that we can feel things that we can't see. So if you imagine, if you've ever, maybe you're in a movie theater and if the movie's about to be done and you reach into your purse looking for your car keys and you can feel where the car keys are, you know that you're not looking because it's dark and you know they're in your purse, you knew how to open it, you could put your hand in there, you could rummage around and you can tell when you got something. That's a proprioception. Also the pushback. So if you are, maybe you're a piano player, and you know how the keys on the piano feel springy or if they feel too clunky, you don't like it. So that proprioception is pushback, your keyboard, how it feels on your fingers, another proprioception. So those kind of things are like stability and pushback and environmental stuff. The next thing we're going to talk about is learning. And this is an interesting one. The first thing in learning is we want to identify the audience's preconceptions. And all of us have preconceptions. And here's an example. When you were a little kid, they were teaching you math, okay? You probably loved it or hated it, one of the two. There's no in between with math. And so the first thing your teacher did, she said, okay, we have numbers. So, okay, kids, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's your numbers, blah, blah, blah. And you accepted that as fact. Okay, the next thing they did, you got into the next grade and they said, guess what? We're going to do math again. This time we're going to do fractions. And you're like, yay, fractions, right? And they said, this is like the quintessential example, a pizza. Or you might have had a pie. It could have been a pie or a pizza. It was one of the two. You know I'm right. And then the teacher said, okay, we're going to cut this up. And now we have 1/2 of the pie or 1/4 of the pie, which is larger. So in your mind, you remember you had this awesome teacher and she said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 4 is bigger than 2. Now you're in fractions. Oh crap, 1/2 is bigger than 1/4. What just happened? Your teacher told you something that literally flies in the face of what you had already drilled in your head. So many kids, especially in elementary, have a tough time when they get to fractions because in their mind, it's backwards. And they may not even know why it doesn't make sense. And then the other thing we'll do is we'll memorize it just long enough to take the test and then forget everything. We're like, okay, till tomorrow at noon, I have to know that 1/2 is bigger than 1/4. And then kerblooey, okay? And you're right? And so that's your preconception. If you as a designer do not address that and say, okay, kids, I know we said 1/4 and 1/2 is opposite of what you think because you think 4 is bigger, so 1/4 should be bigger, but it's not. You have to literally take that head on and you have to address it, talk about it, demonstrate it, show it, and in their mind help compartmentalize it and give it its appropriate memorization. If you don't do that, and oftentimes we don't, if there's any little inkling in the back of your head that was still like not quite getting it, over time that will take over and you'll never quite understand something. Since as designers, we want people to literally intuitively understand the products or the mobile apps or the environments we design, we have to think in our mind, what does the audience believe to be true? That's their preconception. So if they believe that the door to the building should have a big, maybe entrance to it, and they're looking for that, if they don't see what they expect, they can't find the door. You know what I'm saying? So you have to know what they believe. You also, in the second point, you want to help them gain factual knowledge. Factual knowledge is more than just random stuff, okay? So factual knowledge is when they learn something and they relate to it, they feel like, first of all, they wanted it as knowledge and they're storing it appropriately. So when you're making a mobile app, maybe in your Mobile Me, you were thinking, okay, I'm going to help the person using this gain factual knowledge. So if they entered the data about their days for 3 or 4 days in a row, And then my app maybe makes it into a pie chart, or it makes it into a bar chart, or it identifies bullet points of things about their life, that they will, first of all, value that knowledge, find it useful, and they will have it presented to them in a way that makes sense. So that's where they're gaining factual knowledge. Knowledge is different than just data or just stuff, because we might see lots of random numbers or a lot of really complicated things, but sometimes we can't make sense of it easily and we just ignore it. So if I don't instantly understand that I like this and I understand it, I'm just going to dismiss it. You want to help them make a conceptual framework. A conceptual framework is what we understand to be true. And so this is where, like, when we listened to the lecture, one of our guest speakers was talking about using social media and making the mobile app mirror certain social media programs. That's really good. You can also look at things like the Apple iOS standards. So the standards, the things that we know from, like, say, from our mobile phones. We've learned certain things. Maybe there's certain conventions like the like button, or favorites, or things that you can maybe post something. If you were going to post something, you know there's a certain window that you type into, and then you have to push like a little letter send thing, or maybe you have to push a post, you know. But there's certain things that you have gotten very used to, and you understand them instantly. So the minute you pick up a new app, if it reminds you of Twitter, you just feel like, yeah, you're at home. You know what to do. If you look at something brand new, and here as designers, we are always like, I want to make mine totally unique, very different, one of a kind, and everybody looks at it and goes, I don't get it. Yuck. Okay, so what you want to play on are their comfort factor, the ease of use, how you name things, does it make sense? All those things, you want to help them have a conceptual framework. So if the conceptual framework is how an Android phone works, or if it's how Twitter works, or if it's Facebook, or if it's you know, your Fitbit app, whatever it is, whatever things that your target audience is familiar with, you should totally make use of those. You should look at expectations, like, what do I expect to be in the top of my screen? What do I expect to be in the bottom? What do I expect to be a slide? What do I expect to be a pull-down menu? What can I scroll, right? So that's what you can think to yourself is that framework. And the better you can do that, you can always pick colors, you can change out photos, you can pick the appropriate framework. So if I expect this to work like Twitter, and you make it work like Amazon.com, it's a framework, but it's not the one I expected, so I'm still floundering around. You want to organize the information for retrieval and application, okay? And here's what I mean by that. So if, let's say you've designed your MobileMe app, you've determined what sort of information or what kind of buttons, what it's going to do. Maybe you've got 2 or 3 functions it does. You don't want to have 20 because, oh my God, they'll get lost. And, you know, maybe it needs to do a couple things really well, okay? So you want to organize those according to how I would use them, okay? So maybe you're saying, okay, during the day, I'm going to have a button that I can enter my homework assignments into. So I know what's due today. Maybe it has a little calendar feature that's really easy to use. It also has a timer feature that's going to reminders, like timers and reminders. And maybe it has another one that pulls up traffic information, okay? So you've got those 3 things. You want to organize those according to how frequently you're going to use it and in what order. So you might say, okay, you know what? I'm going to put the one that's a traffic map, I'm going to put that at the bottom, and I'm going to put on the side or a pull down, I'm going to put my other functions. So maybe the ones that are about the school day are at the top, and the ones that are about commuting are at the bottom, okay? And you can think about where you place them, because the one you're going to use the most, you want to think about, how did I hold this device, and how am I pushing, what am I pushing on there to make it the very most convenient? You could say to yourself, I want this to be so I can hold it. I don't even have to, I can do it with one hand. So I can just push it like that. You know, So that's what, when you think about how you organize your screen, what you put where, that's what you're thinking about, is what finger am I going to push this with? Because I know it's my sensory system, my mobility, it's my vision system, and make the stuff big enough to see, because maybe if you are just glancing at this, maybe it's your traffic app or something. Have you ever had the like the Google Maps or maybe the stuff in your car, and you can't quite read it while you're driving and it's not big enough, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to crash. So do not play hard to get here. Make it so that you can quickly, whatever, think to yourself, okay, I want to know this, this, and this, and make them prioritize. So the one that I want to know the most and the easiest is biggest. It is coming out, maybe as white letters out of a dark background, something like that. So it's very easy to retrieve it in a one push button or one slide or something like that. And it's in the position I expect it to be, and it's big enough. I don't have to, I can just glance at it, and I totally have it at a glance. That's what you want. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about language. The verbal system is mostly how we use language. And here's an interesting thought. The verbal system in humans is highly developed. And it also allows the brain to, what we call chunk, to think in keywords. So if you think about hashtags or keyword searches, that's chunking in a sense. You know, because you're encapsulating a bunch of ideas in one word or one hashtag. And so if it says something about, the hashtag says Beyonce, and you're like, everything you know about Beyonce just came to your mind, right? I love it. I hate it. Oh, that song. Oh, the one blah, blah, blah. Oh, I bought that when I was, you know, everything you knew comes up in just one simple little phrase, triggers a bunch of memories. If you are designing a logo or a brand does the same thing. So if I showed you a logo, maybe I show you Coca-Cola, you can all instantly, the minute I say Coca-Cola, you've all pictured something in your mind. What color was the logo? Red? White? Yeah. And people will remember that. So they would remember it if it was Diet Coke, Diet Cherry Coke, lemon lime is, you know, all these things, Coke Zero, blah, 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 blah. Anytime they see the word Coke, bam, they thought of all of it. So it's a really, really effective way to get people on the same page. We can do with the verbal with certain words. So when you put things into verbiage on your designs or your products, your spaces, environments, or whatever, you want to use the word that verbally means exactly what your target audience believes it to mean. And so if they were looking at something on an app and they wanted to find a location, you could write the word location, but maybe they expected it to say map. I don't know. Those are things you test out with your audience. And sometimes a very small change can suddenly make everything work 100 times better. So you really always are questioning, did I use the right word? Is it in the right place? Is it in the right color? Is it where they expect it? You're mind readers now, okay? When we also use verbal words, they do bring a lot of stuff to mind. And so that's something to know as well. Nonverbal systems are the sensory systems. That's what we just talked about. So you want the visual and the verbal to work together, and they will accentuate each other. So if you say on your button, maybe it says maybe social life, and the picture has a group of friends at maybe like at a club on campus. When it says social life, now they're thinking campus social life because they're seeing this club, and maybe it's, maybe it's a running club. And so everybody's got running gear on and they're jogging and stuff like that. And now they're thinking, oh, okay, this is something on my campus, because they've seen this and they thought, okay, those two go together. So the verbal, nonverbal can work together, should work together, and can actually give a richer and more interesting message. The next topic is metacognitive, and metacognitive skills are learning to use the audience's internal dialogue. This is when you start to test your products, and to see what people think. One of the things that we use for testing, like a mobile app, so if you've got your application here and maybe you've put your screens on it, we sometimes use what's called a talk aloud protocol. In talk aloud, we ask the people to say exactly what comes to their mind. So if I were to show you a brand new phone and it's got a brand new app, and I said talk aloud, I might say, okay, I wonder where I turn this phone on. I'll bet there's a button. Oh yeah, here's the button. I found the button. Okay, I'm supposed to run this app. Okay, I'm going to push the button for the app, and I'm going to see, okay, so here's the app I'm supposed to get. Okay, I'm going to push that one. Now it's here. And so I'm talking the whole time I'm doing this. So if you start making your apps and you hand it to somebody and say, look at this, tell me what you see, they might say, oh, I see there's a notification on screen. Oh, I see there's a cursor. Oh, there's a top bar. And as people are talking about it, you can start using where it says here, the internal dialogue. This is what's normally going on in our head all the time. And you're thinking, oh, my internal dialogue says, when on earth is Deb going to shut up? This lecture is just going on and on and on. Oh my God, I thought this was a 15-minute thing, and she's just like, who knows, there could be 100 more slides, right? So that's our internal dialogue. And I'm going, oh God, are the students bored? Can I tell? Internal dialogue. The better you can anticipate what is in your target audience's mind, what they're thinking. So you can say, okay, the minute this comes on, they're going to be thinking, how do I run this thing? Where is the button, the next button? I want to find my location. Where's the location button? So you are prompting and answering those questions in your design. So you're making the button that is used most frequently the biggest, or the most obvious, or the only ones that's there. So you try to be psychic and think about what is in their mind. What are they silently thinking to themselves? You're going to develop strategies for using metacognitive skills such as an inquiry cycle. An inquiry cycle is asking the next question. So I picked up the new phone. I said, oh gosh, how do I turn it on? Oh, here I found the button. Oh, okay. I wonder if the volume's on. I wonder if there's a button for that. So that might be my next question. Or my next question might be, how many apps are on here? Where are the folders? So the inquiry cycle is asking one question after the next. So if I figured out the first question that was in their mind, what's the second? And the better you can get at this, being very intuitive, if you can answer these things visually, and you can make a very intuitive product, something that just works really, really well. And that's what we want to do, because as a society, we tend to blame ourselves. So if the app that I designed for this device works really terrible, I, as a person using it, tend to blame myself. And you'll see this if you tested products and you hand it to the person. The first thing you say is, I'm not testing you, I'm testing the app. And the first thing the person will say is, oh, I'm so stupid. I just don't understand these things. I always push the wrong buttons. It's me. I'm so sorry. And it's not them. It's us as designers. It means we didn't really ask the right inquiry cycle, or we didn't make something where they expected it. And if the user blames themselves for a poorly designed product or for an unpredictable product, they won't like it. And we don't like to feel stupid. And so the minute my product makes me feel stupid, I just say, forget it. I'm done with this thing. I'm just so done with this product, right? The minute this product makes me feel smart, I love it, because I like to feel bigger, stronger, smarter, happier, more attractive, more excited, all that stuff. I like to feel that way. So you want what you designed to make me feel more empowered, more in control, maybe more calm, maybe more happy. Whatever that emotion we decided, I want to feel more of it because of your thing. And so that inquiry cycle and the internal dialogue and questioning, this is what you'll use when you start making user tests, because you will be probing what you did compared to their internal dialogue. if you find that somebody performs poorly on your, maybe you have your app and you said, okay, show me where the start button is, and they push the wrong thing, instead of going, oh my God, you pushed the wrong button, you know, wrong, you say to them, say, that was interesting. Tell me why you pushed that button. And they'll tell you. And they'll say, well, it was red, so I thought it was the start button. And you're like thinking, no, start button's green. I made the stop button red, right? Haven't you ever seen a traffic light? You know? But in their mind, if the red one was more dynamic, or it was higher on the screen, or it was bigger, they'll maybe go to that. And if they tell you why they did something wrong, you, first of all, you don't tell them you did it wrong. You say, thank you for showing me and telling me about that. And then you say to yourself, okay, the one that's on top and the one that's red is going to get pushed first, so that better be the button I want them to push then, right? So you've used the inquiry cycle and the internal dialogue. You've observed what they did, and now you can fix your design. And you want them to make mistakes, because every time they make a mistake, you can fix your design better. And that's what you want, is you want to improve things. And that's why we see updates to apps and improvements in products all the time. You want to understand how people learn. And one of the things for learning, if you think about the computer, if you're using a new software program on maybe on the computer, and maybe you're taking one of the 3D modeling classes and you've never done that. And if you pull down the menus, have you noticed how they sometimes have a keystroke off to the side? And so as you pull down the menu, when you're new, you're pulling it down and you're putting your cursor on the command you want or on the tool you want. But later, if you looked off to the side of that menu, you'd see, oh, well, that was a Control C, that was a Control V, that was a Control X. So the next time you want that command, you can start learning keystrokes. So that's a built-in learning, because they know the first time you're going to hunt around. But then as you get more proficient, you like shortcuts. And so if you can build in those shortcuts, that will help somebody really learn quickly and easily. And that's what you want to do. So that is the lecture for tonight. I'm happy to take questions. If you have a question, please go ahead and just unmute your mic, and then we can take questions. See who we've got on here tonight. So we've got Derek and Nicole, Crystal, Jason, and did I forget anyone? I think that's it. Questions on the lecture material? Anything? Anybody? Okay. Okay, I think if there are no questions, I'm not seeing any here, I will go ahead and I will conclude the lecture.